There's something about nature that helps you process so much that can go on in your life.
The Boundary Waters is one of, if not the most visited wilderness area in the country. So it's a series of pristine lakes that are connected by ancient trails. We call them portages now. So it's a place that people come to reconnect, to rejuvenate, or to discover new things about themselves. Sawbill Canoe Outfitters was founded in 1957 by Frank and Mary Alice Hansen, my grandparents. They moved up here full-time with just a couple of canoes and a couple sleeping bags. So now we're here. So we're third generation owners. It's a wonderful business. It relies completely on the wilderness. A lot of people use the word disconnect. They say, I want to come up there to disconnect, which I think it's actually the opposite. I think people come up here to reconnect, and they're reconnecting with themselves. They're reconnecting with their travel partners. They're reconnecting with the world around them. You know, it's an act of presencing that you don't get a lot of opportunity to do elsewhere in your life. So that concept of disconnecting is, you know, you're disconnecting from something, but you're reconnecting in another way.
My name is Emily Tidwell. I'm an action sports photographer. I live in Reno, Nevada, and I grew up in Cook County, Minnesota. The whole way I even became a photographer was because of how much I loved being outside. And so when I decided what I was going to do with my career was to spend all of my time outside in these places that I love. And that really led me to climate advocacy. But climate advocacy really added to my anxiety. It made me really want to go back home to talk to somebody who's been on the front lines and seen all these changes in our climate for the last 20 years.
Hello, I'm Lonnie Dupre. I live in Grand Marais, Minnesota. I'm a carpenter, and then when I'm not a carpenter, I go exploring, mostly in the Arctic, and I love it. Hi.
Hello.
That's Marcy.
I'm Marcy's. Hello. How's it going?
It's going good.
Good.
Thank you for coming over.
Yeah. This place is gorgeous.
Yeah, this is a French sill technique. Okay. It's similar to. I started digging into climate change pretty heavily in the early 2000s. We're maybe 75 miles from the North Pole, and look at all this water.
Here, we'll do a little spin around.
When I grew up in a stable environment. The one thing we always had, even if you didn't have a stable family or you didn't have this or that, you could always count on 4 seasons. You could count on them. We have none of that now. And I get really emotional about it because it's like losing a family member.
My first experience with anxiety was through my dreams. I started really dealing with anxiety probably when I was around 10 years old. Growing up at times was pretty challenging. There was a lot of places that didn't feel particularly safe. I knew I could always go outside. Most times I was just sitting there in silence because that felt safe.
What do you think about hands?
It's cool. It's whatever's natural for you.
Okay.
My hands too. That helps.
I'm Monica Arienzo. I'm an associate research professor here at the Desert Research Institute in Reno. And for my job, I study microplastics as well as other pollutants in the environment. I got into microplastics through my prior work, where I was studying ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica. That's where I first came across microplastics. And I thought to myself, well, if people are finding microplastics in the Arctic, are they in my backyard? There was a study that came out that looked at microplastics in 30 some odd lakes around the globe. And they found that Lake Tahoe was the third most contaminated lake with respect to microplastics.
It feels like microplastics and my mental health are intertwined. They're both these invisible threats that feel completely out of my hands.
Plastic particulates came across our desks, so to speak, in 2016, and we were asked to collect water samples at the base of a glacier in the Himalayas. We combined that with some climbing that we were doing there and managed to get one of these samples. In a little bitty sample, they found 3 plastic, almost fibers. So that would tell me that it's probably everywhere now, right? There's probably not a place on the planet that doesn't have plastic in the water somewhere.
When we sample for microplastics in waters, we pump water from the water body of interest through filters that have a known size opening on them. A lot of the things the clothing we wear, to even just the air around us can have microplastics in it. And so we worry a lot about contamination. So we do all of that in the field, and then we try to keep that contained, and then we return it back to the lab.
Going out and testing for these water samples is less about finding the information, it's more about the action. As I think anxiety centers on not doing anything. My anxiety doesn't want me to do anything. Even if I'm finding out more information, it doesn't want me to act on it. Taking action regardless of the outcome helps soothe that anxiety.
I have really amazing memories of going up to the Boundary Waters as a kid with my family on week-long canoe trips, having parents who love camping, hiking, canoeing, fishing. They just like to be outdoors in all seasons. They were never on a mission to raise an Olympian. They're like, we just want a kid who is healthy and likes being outside. The Boundary Waters is this beautiful place where people can go and reconnect with nature and challenge themselves. I think it's a chance to really unplug and slow down and just be listening to the wind and the trees and the birds. There's something so calming about being out in nature. I know there's so many studies on the effects of nature as calming, restorative, it actually does help us.
Here it is, the most amazing food wrap ever developed.
So when we looked at the microplastic sample from the Boundary Waters, what was first surprising to me was the amount of fibers that we were seeing on our samples. As we try to maybe move towards a society that uses less plastics, there are going to be certain things that are just going to be really hard to totally remove plastics from. And this is because we've been using plastics since World War II. And it's
crystal clear plastic that lets you see everything you wrap. Now look at this. Clings like magic.
And that was when kind of plastics entered into household use.
You have a smooth, tight cover that keeps flavor locked in.
Over time, with all of that plastic use, it's been able to escape into the environment. Those plastics have then been breaking down to form these microplastics. And microplastics in particular can be transported through the atmosphere, so through the air. And so this is how we think plastics are sort of being transported around the globe and why we are finding these tiny pieces of plastics all throughout the world.
It's so important to be able to talk about mental health because mental health is human health, and it's just as important as our physical health. And I think there's often been a taboo around talking about it, and especially in the realm of eating disorders. This is something that I've struggled with since I was 18 years old. When I was 18, I was very ill. I was diagnosed with bulimia. And then this season, I started struggling again because I basically had been overworking myself since the last Olympics. And I had been putting too much on my plate. I had been trying I was trying to be perfect once more. And I think people just want to know that they're not the only ones, because when you're struggling with any mental health issue, it can feel so isolating. When I started working with POW and they explained the concept of imperfect advocacy, that really resonated with me because it really helped with my issues of perfectionism with my eating disorder and my own sport. You know, I don't have to be perfect in order to be a professional athlete. I don't have to be perfect to be good enough and to be worthy of being loved and, you know, being a good friend and teammate and athlete. And so I can still care about the planet and climate. And even if I'm not perfect, as long as I'm working on it and I'm doing the things that I can, I'm still allowed to care.
Hearing a story like Jesse's makes me feel more seen. It makes me feel less alone, and it takes some of that weight off of my mind and gives me hope that maybe I can change. I have control over my mind, and I can have control over my future. These places are so special, these public lands, for many reasons. I think the threat of microplastics is really concerning because it can hit home for a lot of people because it's not just here, it's everywhere, it's global.
I don't believe we will recycle our way out of this problem. We have to essentially turn off the tap.
We're talking about changes that need to happen on a government level and on very large distribution levels.
It's not about going out there and freezing your ass. It's not about going out there and conquering a mountain. It's about going out there to learn.
Having fun now.
It's about being in tune with the environment and making it your home, not making it your adversary.
At the end of the day, what is going to protect our wild places are people. If we don't give people some stake in the game here, no one's gonna care. I can see it in their eyes when they come back out from their first trip or their 50th trip, or they're coming back after their first 3 generations trip, or they've just gone in to scatter their parents' ashes. I see all of those people come back in, and they're the ones who are gonna care. I think sharing your love of a place with other people in your life is impactful and important. So talking about the impact it's had on your life or why it's important to you with other people is really helpful. Talking about it and then voting. Voting always helps.